Welcome to Totally Over the Spectrum, where we dive into embracing autism through understanding and support. Welcome to episode 2. Is autism a disability?
So we were talking about this before, and what was your initial reaction?
My initial reaction was absolutely not. It is not a disability.
Okay, so this is a really controversial issue in the autistic community. I think most things are kind of polarized in the autistic community. You're sort of all on board with something or really not on board.
Okay, I agree.
So people either want autism viewed as a difference and not a disability. They're looking for acceptance, right? The whole concept of neurodiversity.
Okay.
Sort of normalizing the idea that neurodiversity rather than pathologizing autism. On the other hand, you have some autistic people who really struggle and have really high support needs. And they might never be able to live independently. And usually it's sort of parents of kids with really high needs, like your level 3 kids, who don't like the idea of someone with autism who is level 1, who has less support needs, being in the same category. They don't like that everybody's lumped under one umbrella term of autism because they feel like level 1 people are taking away supports from the level 3 kids who really need it. And they don't look at them really as being the same. And I think, superficially, it might look like people with less support needs have it all together. They're able to live independent, functional lives. But that doesn't mean that they don't have their own sets of difficulties.
Absolutely. I think we also have to look into the word disorder, right? And truly understand what that is, and disability and what that is. Because I think autism, based on level 1 to 3, can float between a disorder and a disability, right? So I think we need to look into that and ask people to come up with their own perspectives on whether it's a disorder or a disability.
So there are a lot of people who don't even like the idea that autism is considered a disorder. So I think in order to tackle this this concept, you first have to look at what is autism? What is it? How is it defined?
Okay, it's a neurodiversity, right?
Yeah.
All right. So it still falls under the same category as ADHD, epilepsy, Down syndrome. All of them fall under that category. And it is a disorder, not a disability in the medical term. But the functionality in which a person is able to exist in society and appreciate and enjoy all aspects of what we deem as the norm society deems, then translates from a disorder to a disability. So your level 1s are more considered as a disorder, where your level 3s would then be considered as a disability.
By the medical definition, that is absolutely true. Autism is a neurodevelopmental disorder, according to the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual. Mm-hmm. So that means that it affects the growth and development of the brain.
Yep. More effective, more to the point of communication, right? Communication, behavior are the top 2 criteria in which autism affects people.
So if we look at the areas of social communication and interaction, right? So the first thing that they talk about in the DSM would be social reciprocity. So they look at things like abnormal social approach, failure of normal back and forth conversation. And these are their terms. Normal is their terms, not mine. Abnormal is their term, not mine. Reduced sharing of interests, emotion, or affect, and failure to initiate or respond to social interactions.
Okay. So I'm just going to play devil's advocate throughout this whole thing because I honestly do not look at it as a disability, right? So Tourette's is falls under the same category, right? And the the blurting out of certain words that people with Tourette's have. It's a need, it's a palliative need. Like on the palate, it has to sound and feel a certain way. And those certain words help relieve, stress for them, or is stimmed for them, right? And it translates into autism. Autism is the same thing. People who flap, that is a stim. So Tourette's and, autism have the same thing. But people, if you say you have Tourette's syndrome, it is a disorder, not a disability. If you catch what I'm saying.
I do. I'm thinking of it in the perspective of people who don't like the word disability, right? And I think the problem with that is that the term disability is so stigmatized.
It is.
Right?
Absolutely.
So the word disability means that there is something wrong with you. And I think if we take away the idea that a disability is something wrong with you, then we have a different perspective. So I looked up the definition of what a disability is, because I have to find the facts.
Absolutely.
Right?
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
So there are different definitions depending on which organization is talking about the term disability. So you have the World Health Organization, the American CDC, and the Canadian government. And the Canadian government one had this huge paragraph that used the word disability in the definition of disability. Completely useless. It was
okay.
It was terrible. I hated every second of that. So I finally ended up on the Oxford Dictionary.
Okay. All right.
Right? Yeah.
So we're going to look at a clinical description of the word.
Forget
all
these
right.
other places.
Okay,
They're all over the place.
Let's forget the medical. Let's forget the legal. Let's forget. Okay.
Let's go straight to the dictionary.
Okay. Absolutely. Yeah. Okay.
The Oxford Dictionary says that a disability is a physical, a psychological, a medical, or a learning impairment that impacts a person's ability to undertake everyday tasks.
Okay. All right. I would agree with that. And that comes actually quite close to the definition set out by the United States, actually. Their medical description of a disability comes very close to the Oxford.
Yeah, it does.
Clinical.
The problem I get stuck on is the word impairment. Right? Everything is so negative. Everything has to be really negative surrounding the term disability. Right?
Okay.
And that is hard to hear. That feels condescending, and it feels like there's something wrong with you. Right? And that's where this whole affirming idea comes from, that we'd like to talk about neurodiversity, and that it is a difference and not a disability. So if we're looking purely at this definition of a disability, left-handedness would be a disability.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? And for a long time it was treated abnormally. It was treated like you cannot be left-handed. That's wrong. And they would force kids to use their right hand.
They would.
Right? Very strictly and abusively force them to use their right hands.
Thank goodness we've evolved from there.
And I think that autism should be on the same trajectory, where we stop looking at it as an impairment all the time.
I think it has, in all honesty, because if you look at, let's take one of my favorite people, Temple Grandin. If you look at her era of growing up with autism, they were deemed to be kids that were possessed and were taken to churches at times to be, an exorcism to be performed on them. Most of them were institutionalized, right? So her mom, and she credits her mother to this day, for pushing her to and not giving up in order for her to be who she is today. So I think if you look at what she had to go through and what her mom had to battle in society to get her daughter the opportunities that she had, I think it's come a long way from there. Do we have a long way to go? Absolutely. I think we're just coming to the tip of the iceberg.
From an autistic perspective, I like to think of it as a difference. I like to think that my brain works differently and that it isn't impaired in some way. Certainly, processing information is completely different.
Mm-hmm.
And then so speech and language is different. Motor control can be different. As a parent, when my kids were diagnosed, everyone was so sad. They kept telling me how sorry they were, and so you get this impression that autism is this terrible, terrible thing that you deserve to be sorry about. And then once I started reading up on it, I don't understand why everyone is so sad about this.
Oh, I'd trade your kids for mine anyway.
Some days.
Yep, absolutely. Not some days, quite often.
Quite often. That's because all kids have difficulties, right?
Yep.
And as a parent, how your personality comes into play and the personality of your kids come into play. So how well a parent is equipped to deal with the difficulties that their child is having is about how the parents are wired and how the kids are wired. So because I'm autistic and my kids are autistic, they make perfect sense to me. Everything feels very logical. Like there's no part of how they act or how they interpret the world that I don't sit back and go, oh, I wonder why that is. Oh, I could figure that out, right? Like, why are they doing a certain thing? It all seems very logical to me. But for someone with anxiety, like my kids don't have anxiety. So when I see or talk to someone who has a child with anxiety, I think, wow, I don't know that I'm equipped to deal with that difficulty. I think that would be really hard because it's not logical. It's all emotion based, and they can't always hear the logic. And I want to logic my way out of everything, and you can't do that with someone who has anxiety. You need a completely different approach.
Absolutely.
And sometimes you just have to, let them go through their meltdown or their
emotional cycle there.
Yeah, before that you can talk to them and try to say to them, all the things that you use for anxiety. Are you catastrophizing? Are you mind reading? Are you fortune telling? All of those things. But they have to be willing and ready to talk about that and receive it. And so much of their ability to deal with their anxiety has to come from their own motivation to work on it. You can't help somebody who doesn't want to work on it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that might also be to a degree with an autistic child, but I just don't find that as difficult. It seems very logical to me. If one of my kids is having a meltdown, they don't really have meltdowns, but occasionally when they were younger, they might have sort of smaller versions of meltdowns. Alex would cry a lot, but you could talk to him. I could talk him through it.
But the reason I think a lot of times you say my kids don't have this is because as a parent, you have put in the hard work to set an amazing foundation for their learning, right? And I think one of the most crucial part of that learning was teaching them the word no, which we will have an entire talk on. But going back to saying that personality as a parent and a personality of your kids and how you deal with that also comes into play.
Yeah, I really set up our environment in a way that I could function. So I didn't get my diagnosis until last year. Like, I'm really late to the party. People are going, oh, I'm a late diagnosed autistic person, and they're in their 20s. And I'm like, wow, yeah, it is late, because usually you get diagnosed at 2 or 3 or, 5 maybe. But when, being diagnosed at 50, I feel like I'm the geriatric late of that community almost. So I didn't know that I was putting these things in place because I'd just always done it to put them in place for myself. So I need a really structured environment. So because I need to put that in place for myself, I automatically put it in place for my kids. Otherwise, I couldn't have dealt with it. I couldn't have met their needs and my own needs at the same time if I didn't have a really good structure in place.
yet another topic that we're going to discuss.
Yeah, that's a whole episode
Yeah.
on its own.
Absolutely.
So when we come back to the definition of disability, sure, autism falls under that definition. Absolutely does.
But we're sitting here having a discussion from a person who is been diagnosed, has 2 children with the diagnosis. And so let me ask you, do you believe you have a disability?
I think by the clinical definition, I don't feel impaired.
Okay.
I feel like impairment is such a negative term, and it feels so harsh. I think that if we look at it as something that makes it difficult, it impacts a person's ability to undertake everyday tasks. Yes, autism impacts my ability to do everyday tasks. Yes, it does.
That is socially acceptable to society. But it's not difficult for you to do it if it was within your logical aspect of it.
Yes, the world is geared to neurotypical people.
Yeah.
And as long as the world demands conformity to the neurotypical way, autism will always be a disability.
So that, in essence, is where we need to look at change taking place.
Yes.
Yeah. Because I've had the privilege of working with your youngest as well as your eldest, who I love to bits. And I just look at them, especially your eldest, in total awe sometimes. I love this kid. Because I ask them to do things and they come up with some ingenious ways of achieving a result with coming from totally different perspectives, totally different avenues that neurotypical people would not explore, would not adventure down. Right? So their problem-solving ability is, for me, is far greater than neurotypical people. Because they are able to achieve the same result by finding several different pathways. To me, that blows my mind. So I don't look at it as a disability.
I think where people will get really upset with the idea that it's not a disability is when you have neurotypical people with kids with really high support needs. Those tend to be the vocal people that are like, well, my child is never going to do this. They're never going to be able to live independently. They're never going to be able to do all the things that neurotypical people will be able to do, get a job, get married, have kids, all those, that timeline and that idea of what life should be like.
Do they ever stop to ask their kids, take a moment just to observe their level of happiness? I bet you they don't. They want everything for that child that society dictates is normal. And society dictates that this is successful. You have a successful, relationship. You have a successful business. You are, fulfilled independently as a person if you have A, B, and C. But nobody stops to say or look to see if they're totally happy in the world that they're in. And what's wrong with that? Who says there's something wrong with that? Or why should somebody say there's something wrong with that?
Capitalism says there's something wrong with that. Peter is one of the happiest people I know.
And has the least amount of demands.
Yes.
Totally. His receptive language is really, really high. There's nothing that you can get past that kid, honestly. Because you just have to, we're sitting and having a conversation, and I'll glance over and I can see the twinkle in his eye or that little smirk over there. And I go, you're up to no good. Or you're taking this conversation in and you're going to do something about it when we least expect it.
It's true.
And he, but his expressive language is not there. But when I stand in front of him and allow him that processing time, I can see the, his brain working to go, I know this is what I want to say. I need a longer period of time to express that, or I need to express it in a simpler form. We complicate matters and we complicate emotions and we complicate situations because we throw so much into it. When if you take the frills away and you go to the meats and potatoes of a situation, it is very simple. You don't need that many responses to achieve happiness. You really don't.
I agree. I think neurotypical people really make life difficult.
So, yeah. So, to me, like, I go back. I guess that's why I love what I do. I love what I do. And it's because I sit there and I go, what have these people, ingenious people, taught me today to think outside of the box? How incredible is that? Neurotypical people live in a box. Neurodivergent people live outside of the box with a greater sense of freedom. So, really, who is being limited here? It's the neurotypical people.
It's all about perspective.
That's my perspective on it.
I like your perspective. Not every educator has your perspective. The number of people I've had, been through a lot of EAs, been through a lot of teachers with both kids. And when you get educators who are kind, but not really pushing the education aspect of it. And I mean, it is a kindness to help Peter to tie his shoes. But that's not educating him. You're not teaching him to tie his shoes. So what are we actually achieving here? Like, I want him to learn to do things. I don't want people to keep doing things for him because they feel sorry for him or because they're trying to help. Right? Helping is educating. Helping is giving him the tools to help himself for as much as he can. And we don't know how much he can. And there should be no limit on how old he needs to be to learn a certain task. I can't stand that. I can't stand when people are like, well, they should be doing this by this age and they should be doing this by this age. And if they haven't done it by now, well, then they're probably never going to do it. You don't know that.
That's true. I mean, we understand that autism is a delay. It's a delay, people. It doesn't mean that we have reached a dead end. It's just that it's going to take a little bit longer to achieve the same levels. And, you need to spend your lifetime learning, embracing, growing. So what if it takes longer? As long as you're happy, as long as you're healthy, and as long as you're fulfilled. So what?
People can't always see the happiness in it. They can't imagine that if they were in that situation where it was difficult for them to communicate verbally, they can't imagine that they would be happy. They can't imagine that they would be happy if they didn't get married or they didn't have kids or they didn't have a good job or whatever it is that they feel that their kids are going to miss out on. They can't imagine themselves being happy in that world that their kid is living in. So that sounds more like a them problem, really.
Oh, I agree. There's a lot of them problems out there. And, I guess problem is a harsh term. It's a them work in progress. is the way I like to look at it.
That's kind. I hope it's a work in progress.
You know, I'm the glass half full kind of person. Always looking for the silver lining, no matter what. What did I learn from this situation? How can I apply it the next time? What was the good from it? Because it's very easy to look at all the bad and, you know, blame everybody else for everything else. Oh, it can be done in a heartbeat. But, it's a doom and gloom. It's like, oh, no, that's not where I want to be.
No,
So-
I agree.
So, going back to, you don't believe it's a disability. You're a person with autism. What would you like to have autism definition or category? What would you say it's a disorder? It's a disability?
I would say it's a difference.
Okay.
I would say neurodiversity should be looked at as a difference, like a different operating system. So the best analogy I heard is that, neurotypical people are on a certain operating system and neurodiverse people are on a different one, like
iPhones and
Android.
Androids.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Like that.
All right.
But I think as long as the neurotypical world demands conformity, autism is going to be a disability, because there's no way that autistic people can function in a neurotypical world and you have to mask yourself. I have to mask myself to fit in. I can't just be who I am. And masking is a whole other deep dive topic, which is extremely traumatizing, because you have to hide that part of yourself so that you can survive. So as long as the world demands conformity, autism is a disability, because you can't function in it in the way neurotypical people do. I would like to see it become a difference. I would like to see it viewed as a difference. I would like to see that level of acceptance. But I don't think we're there yet.
No, I agree with you. I think society in general has a lot to learn, has a lot to grow. It may not be in our lifetime, Kim, but maybe down the line.
I don't know. We've come a long way in the last 10 years. Hopefully we can come even further in the next 10.
Let's hope so. There's the glass half full.
Absolutely.
Okay. Wonderful. What's next on the agenda there?
Our next topic of interest, that's it. Let's talk about, I think next time we'll talk about autism in education.
Oh, my favorite topic.
I know.
So that'll be a great perspective from a parent who has a child going through the system, and as an educator, and the challenges we both face in the system.
And there are a lot of them.
Yes, there are. Absolutely.
I'm excited to talk about it.
Till then, stay tuned.
Thanks for tuning in. If you know someone who might find this episode helpful, feel free to share. Also, check out our website and socials linked in the description.